Hello everyone, my name is Paola Buedo. In this presentation I will introduce the critical process matrix, an interpretative tool for data analysis in bioethics, and I also will present an example of its implementation that I prepare for my master thesis. This tool, this matrix, was developed in Latin America, and its theoretical framework was developed by Jaime Braille, a researcher from Ecuador. So this presentation has two objectives. The first one, to introduce the critical process matrix as a method of data analysis in bioethics, and the second objective is to explain how to apply the critical process matrix to data analysis in bioethics. As I mentioned previously, I will be using an example from my master research in this presentation, but other than that, I have no conflict of interest to declare. So as I said, I will introduce the critical process matrix as an interpretative tool for data analysis in bioethics through the case example of analyzing the reasons for social exclusion of people with schizophrenia. So if we have a data set that has been collected to understand why people with schizophrenia are excluded, socially excluded, and we use mainstream methods to analyze the data, we will conclude, like easily, that people with schizophrenia have individual characteristics that make difficult for them to interact socially, and therefore they are excluded. And this is because the mainstream methods of data analysis in bioethics have certain characteristics, such as they limit the empirical understanding of health, they obscure the analysis of the social processes that illuminate how these empirical and observable factors are produced, and also they are mostly based on an individualistic approach, meaning that all possible explanation of certain phenomena do not include the analysis of social or structural dimensions, but are based solely on the person, his or her biological characteristic or behavior. So this could be highly problematic, since we are not understanding the real problem actually, and therefore we will not provide useful approach to the problem or the issue that we are interested in. When analyzing data, it is very important to remember that personal or individual daily journeys take place in reality. And in reality, a person lives under collectively structured modes of living and has social relationships that shape patterns that influence his or her in a protective or destructive ways. This perspective will help us to gain a holistic view on how a health condition experienced by a person actually relates to their social context, and in what ways it does. It also to have a more realistic understanding of what is really going on. Yeah, so this is going to be achieved by the use of the matrix. Further, our lives are deeply linked to the social structure and morality, of course, which is very determined by classist, racist, and patriarchal relations, and distributed under profound inequalities in our societies. So following our example, social structure, as it affects people with schizophrenia, because they are more exposed to discrimination because of their diagnosis and the stigma that relies on their diagnosis, they are also excluded from educational institution, and therefore they have a lot of difficulties in finding a job. Moreover, a poor Latin American woman with schizophrenia living in the United States may not have the same access to treatment and social opportunities as a white middle class American man. So we need to find a way of analyzing the data that takes into account personal daily itineraries, but also collectively structured ways of lives, social relations, classism, racism, patriarchy, and inequality, and also, for example, stigma related to certain characteristics as psychiatric diagnosis, and perhaps also other things that we are not empirically aware of, but we should according to the data that we are analyzing. So in order to apply the framework, it might be necessary to have access to certain information about the social structures that affect the lives of participants. So the critical process matrix is a tool that can help us to take these different data into account and to better examine the relationship between society and health, and thus to analyze data in bioethics in a more holistic and realistic way. The matrix, as I shortly mentioned in the beginning, is a tool created by an Ecuadorian researcher, which is named Jaime Braille. He developed this tool in the context of the Latin American School Medicine and Collective Health. Latin American Social Medicine and Collective Health, which was a very important political and social movement that was born in the 70s in Latin America. And this movement seeks to understand and promote the impact of social and economic conditions on health and their relevance to medicine and health system. And these academics, but also workers and students that were part of this social movement, I repeat, the Latin American Social Medicine and Collective Health movement, also seeks to promote the conditions in which this understanding can lead to a healthier society and to translate it into public policy. So this is the matrix. This is what the matrix looks like. The idea is to organize data by analyzing each category it belongs to clearly distinguish what belongs to the individual dimension and what belongs to the collective dimension. So the individual dimension includes lifestyles and phenotype and genotype, if applies to our data set. For example, at the intersection of lifestyle and health system, it could be described whether the person has access to the health system, how far it is from their home, what kind of attention it provides. In our example, for example, if there is mental health attention. The collective dimension includes general and structural relations, dominant logics, and ways of life. For example, at the intersection of ways of life and cultural or spiritual means, it could be described the cultural context in which the person lives. For example, if there are too many religions approaches or not. It could also include the characteristic of the cultural context and how it influences, for instance, the health choices. For example, in our case, and we will see in the next slide, but it could some people think that schizophrenia may be connected with some religion thing. So this could also influence the choice that a person or the family has when someone has this diagnosis. So all of this could have a protective or destructive side, that should be categorized also in this part with different colors, as I suggest, like purple if it is protective or black if it is destructive. Let's see how it works like in a full matrix of our example. So as I said, this is an example from my master research study that aims to look why people with schizophrenia are socially excluded. So let's start with the general economic dimension. So the economic dominant logic as the first column, so this is the dominant logic, and we have the economy, like kind of a general or some part of our structure, social structure is economy actually. So we can see that describes or should describe in general how the economic model is structurally organized. As I say, so in this case, our in this part of the world, we are under a productivity and utility value. This is how our economic system is organized. So according to this model, people with schizophrenia who do not fulfill completely the productivity expectations are because as a group are excluded from the labor markets. This has a direct impact on individual level, as a person with schizophrenia would not be employed, and therefore will be economically dependent on family or, for example, states. So you can see that in the whole road, we can see from the dominant logic and how it's affecting the social groups, so all people with schizophrenia in general, and also the individual life of the person. So let us now look to the healthcare system example, which is the other road. So we can see that the dominant logic in the health system is mostly focused on biological processes, yes, still paternalistic in some places, and it's quite institutionalizing, especially in mental health services still. So this affects, of course, people with schizophrenia as a group, here. As we can see, there are usually hyper medicalized with poor social interactions and dependent on someone who care about them, or they are in charge of their care, which overburdens, of course, the person who is in charge of that. So direct consequences at the individual level of all these things that happen in the collective dimension are, of course, at the individual level, and are low initiation, abulia, alienation, and low or no self-esteem at all. So we can see that what happened in the collective dimension impacts or applies in the individual dimension, regardless the very individual characteristic that that person could have. So on the other hand, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the purple sentences are supposed to be the protective points that we can find, for example, in the health system, like here. This means that, for example, the social rehabilitation programs and the national laws, in this case in Argentina, could contribute to the social inclusion of people with schizophrenia by developing the individual dimension. So this law, which is also happening in the dominant logic and affects or should be applied in the health system, also could have a positive impact here if it is applied well. So, of course, I'm not going to explain every row because it will be extremely boring, I guess, and also too long. But if you are interested, you can pause the video and take a deep look. So, indeed, people with schizophrenia could have certain individual phenotypes or genotypes that make it more difficult for them to interact socially with other people. We are not denying that. But also, as we have the possibility to see what's going on at the collective side of the problem or the issue, let's say, with the matrix, we can realize that there are dominant logic, for example, the stigma towards people with mental diagnosis, or paternalistic and biological approaches in mental health care, as well as the, for example, economical utility model, among others, that strongly negatively affects the individual dimension, which can make those worse. And in opposite, if these collective dimensions provides more positive things, maybe we can improve this individual characteristic that people with schizophrenia may have, and maybe we can contribute to a better social inclusion for this group of people. So to be inclusive, we need to recognize the barriers that create an environment of exclusion, and we also need to move away from looking only at the individual level to include all the dimensions that impact our lives. The critical process matrix is a tool that can help us achieve this in bioethics research. So these are the 3 publications where you can find a more detailed explanation of the matrix and the theoretical background, all of them from Braille, the author I mentioned. And I cited here, the book where is published my master thesis, where the example the example I mentioned here is detailed in this book, and is in Spanish.